Fun, lesser-known facts and tales of the Anglo-Saxons, Normans, and Vikings. Farting at a conqueror? In 1068, at the brutal siege of Exeter by the new Norman king, William I, the strange but hilarious behavior of one of the defiant Anglo-Saxon rebels defending the walls is described by William of Malmesbury.
One of them, standing upon the wall, had bared his posteriors, and had broken wind, in contempt of the Normans.
Vikings attacked England before the accepted date of 793 AD. The first Viking attack was actually 4 years earlier, in 789, according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Athelwerd's version of the Chronicle is based upon a Latin translation of a lost version. He tells us that 3 ships landed at Portland, and that when Bedu heard, the High Reeve of Dorchester, heard of their arrival and thinking them to be peaceful traders, he leapt on his horse and sped to the harbour with a few men. He also wrote that Bedu heard spoke to the arrivals in an authoritative tone, and this is why they killed him. The Battle of Stamford Bridge, the 25th of September 1066. Snorri Sturluson, the noted Icelandic warrior poet writing in the early 13th century, stated about England's feared, highly trained elite warriors.
The English have housecarls. Men of such courage that each of them alone is worth 2 of Harold Hardrada's best men.
3 weeks before Hastings, King Harold of England led his elite housecarls, and thanks to a fantastic if brutal victory over the ferocious Norwegian Viking invasion army of the feared King Harold Hardrada. The day was long and desperately fought, with heroism shown on both sides, but ultimately was so disastrous for the Vikings, that only 24 out of 300 of their ships were needed to sail the shattered survivors home. A shocking 92% death toll. Severed limbs? King Cenwulf of Mercia succeeded upon the death of the mighty Offa in 796. He had to deal with Eadbert, who had been ousted after a rebellion, but now returned from exile in Charlemagne's court, leading an uprising to become King of Kent. Cenwulf invaded that shire and retook the kingdom, capturing Eadbert. Then, says the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, he led the rebel bound in chains back to Mercia, then gouged out his eyes and cut off his hands. The Conqueror and the Witch. In 1071, a huge and successful English rebellion in the Ely marshes under Hereward the Wake was foiling the Norman army's repeated attacks. A furious but desperate William resorted to an unusual tactic. He hired a witch. Geoffrey of Monmouth, writing in 1136, said she intended to cast spells and curse the rebels, crushing their courage and will to resist. With the Norman assault towers ready, the witch mounted the top of the foremost tower at the edge of the marshes and began cursing at the hiding English, no doubt laughing to themselves. She also bared her buttocks and farted at them. However, Hereward and his men shot flaming arrows at the towers, turning them into pillars of fire. The Norman troops panicked, and the witch, choking and terrified, fell headlong and broke her neck. Viking berserkers and battle drugs. These Norse warriors, usually fighting in an irregular unit at the front of the Viking army's main shield wall, they worked themselves up into a battle-frenzied bloodlust, which would seemingly give them incredible strength and immortal courage, often biting their own shields in fury, before they rushed into the enemy. Maybe they intended to open up an enemy's ranks, but they seemed not to feel pain or wounds and fought rabidly, like dogs or wolves. Many scholars have alleged that they fought either under the effects of alcohol or by eating toadstools containing muscarine, a poison and psychotropic drug similar to a bad LSD trip. By 1086 only 8% of English land was held by Anglo-Saxons. and only 2 out of 1,400 chief tenants were English. Dublin. It means Blackpool. Old Irish dub equals black and lin equals pool. The area of Dublin has been inhabited by humans for 6,000 years, and before the Viking settlement founded in 841 it was preceded by a Christian ecclesiastical settlement. Amazingly, in an archaeological dig in Temple Bar in 1999, evidence was found indicating that Anglo-Saxons occupied Dublin even before the Vikings. Castles in England before 1066. King Edward the Confessor, 1042 to 1066, was himself half Norman, and he brought many Normans over to England during his reign. One of these was Ralph of Morn, his nephew by his sister Godgiver. Ralph installed Norman favourites under his command in turn, and they immediately began constructing castles, which in the early days were motte and baileys built of earth and wood. At least 4 of these favourites seem to have settled in Herefordshire: Osborne Pentecost, Richard Fitzscrope, Robert Fitzwymark, and a certain Hugh who left his name at Houghton. In 1070, only weeks after a papal legate had left England, King William I ordered that all churches in the land were to be ransacked for their treasures. Surely this was hypocritical for a supposedly Christian king who had received papal support to invade England to bring the corrupt English church back into the fold? In the Anglo-Saxon language, there were more than 8 words for spear, a pointed blade on a long wooden shaft, meant to be thrust or thrown. It was the most common weapon on battlefields at the time, and there were different types used by both nobles or poor men, as a throwing spear or javelin. They have been found in about 85% of weapon-containing early Anglo-Saxon graves. A garseg was a spearman, who was protected by comrades in the shield wall. In Anglo-Saxon England, spears may have also had symbolic associations. The male side of one's family was known as the spear side. The Domesday Book of 1086. The survey intended to inform the Norman King William I on potential sources of funds when he needed to raise money. William sent his agents into English shires to assess and evaluate all possessions that could be taxed and due to him. So detailed was this survey that every animal, owner of land etc. was recorded. It felt like the Last Judgment. A polished version was presented to William at Old Sarum, the Salisbury Oath, August 1086, where a great many nobles submitted in order to receive confirmation of their new English lands. Amongst the names in the book were a certain Alfred Testicle, Thurston Buttock, Alfstan Broad Arse, and a certain Humphrey Golden Bollocks. The final manuscripts were only fully completed on the 9th of September. William never saw the finished version. He had fallen from his horse whilst attacking Morn in France, dying in September 1087. How did Vikings navigate the world's oceans? They used sunstone, a natural, clear volcanic mineral which, when a chunk was placed upon a wooden board with 2 dots, was rotated until the double refraction aligned the dots. Thus the ordinary light path fixed the position of the sun in order to navigate successfully. A descendant of Leif Erikson, Gunnar Egger's son, tried it himself recently near Reykjavik, in cloudy weather, and it was found to be accurate to 1 modern degree. The last Norman king, Henry I, father of 20 illegitimate children, had a violent temper. As a prince in his 20s he once threw a traitorous French noble to his death from the Tower of Rouen. He became king after the violent death of his brother, William II, with whom he and others were hunting in the New Forest. His first reaction was to dash off and seize the treasury at Winchester. As king, Henry was overseeing a delicate land dispute between two powerful nobles, his son-in-law Eustace, who was married to his illegitimate daughter Julianne, and another noble, both having exchanged their children as hostages. However, Eustace was psychopathic and blinded his enemy's son. King Henry, unable to show weakness, allowed the understandably furious French noble to blind and mutilate Eustace and Julianne's two daughters. Two of his very own granddaughters? The outraged parents rebelled. When Julianne met her father, she drew a crossbow and attempted to assassinate him, but missed. She was captured and confined to the castle, but escaped by leaping from a window into the freezing moat below. Did these events inspire the scriptwriter for the 1995 film Braveheart? Were Vikings overrated? They were never the supermen that people seem to want to imagine them to have been. The reality possibly being warped by dodgy TV shows and films. Show business panders to fantasies and stereotypes to make money. However, the truth is that, from the first recorded raids until 1066, when King Harold's housecarls massacred the last Viking army, the Vikings only won 41 out of 93 pitched battles, campaigns and sieges in England and Scotland, whether on land or sea. Just 44%? But TV shows would rather follow fantasies, not facts,